Welcome to Memphis Style Politics. I'm Gale Carson. Today we're going to be discussing the county primary elections, which take place May 7th. However, early voting begins April 17th and goes through May 2nd. My guests today are Alan Crone. I'm sorry, Alan. Alan Crone. Alan Crone, who's the chairman of the Republican Party. Susan Thorp, who is a political columnist for the Commercial Appeal, and Jim Strickland, the former chairman of the Shelby County Democratic Party.
Yeah, you could at least stumbled over his name.
I'm so sorry, Alan. That's the Republican part of you. But anyway, coming up May 7th, we're going to have the county mayor's race, the sheriff's election, 13 county commission seats are open, and then we have 6 clerk positions that the registered voters will be voting on this election. Let's start with the county mayor's race. Initially, the Democrats really had somewhat of a, Bartlett banker Harold Bird was in the race. He got out. Now you have left public defender A.C. Warden and Carol Chumley, and you have a couple of other young men, C. Buchanan and C.J., who's running for mayor as Democrats. But let's talk about Carol Chumley and A.C. Warden. How do you all see this election turning out?
I think Carol's got a tough road to go through. Wasn't there a 50s song, High Hopes, about the little ant and the rubber tree plant? Mm-hmm. I think Carol is almost in that position. Not because she's not a good person, not because she's not qualified, but because she doesn't have much money. And that's my assumption, and that's what everyone's worked under, that she's never announced how much money she's raised. Therefore, I think we can assume she doesn't have much money. And when you're running against a popular, well-funded, respected person like A.C. Warden, it's going to take a lot of money to beat him. I think you'd need $200,000 to $250,000 for TV alone, with additional monies for everything else. And if you're stuck there at $50,000 for your entire campaign, it's going to be really tough. And you know, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not probable.
Susan, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with Jim really completely. Even though Carol has a core constituency in Midtown and has elected her to the state house for many years, and she's done a very good job as a state legislator, the A.C. Warden's popularity, his widespread popularity in the community and his name recognition really eats into Carol's constituency and will rob her of a lot of votes. Plus, I don't think that we can dismiss the fact that this is a primary. It's a Democratic primary. And 70% of the voters in the Democratic primary are African American. And given the history of racial voting in this community, and given the fact that A.C. Warden, albeit he has fabulous popularity between the white community and the black community, he's going to get at least 90% of that 70% vote. And that's a real hard thing for Carol Chumley to overcome.
Well, how do you think the women vote will play, since Representative Chumley is a female and more than 50% of the people who do vote are women?
You know, I've never seen any statistics about women voting for women, but being a woman, I don't think that women vote for women because they're women. Yeah. And although Carol Chumley has taken the lead on some issues in the State House that, particularly child care, that are important to women, I don't think that will carry through in this primary election. And I think money also, like Jim said, has a good deal to do with it. You have to have the money, unfortunately, these days, to get your message out, and it's very expensive to buy television time for a countywide race like this, and I think that's another place she's going to be limited.
If women voted for women simply because they were female, we'd have City Mayor Mary Rose McCormick and County Mayor Carolyn Gates. And we don't.
How much money do you think you need for a county-wide race such as mayor?
You mean total?
Total. Well, just for the primary.
I think to do it right, I think you do need $250,000 at a minimum, depending upon how well funded your opponent is. But just to run the television that you need to move the numbers is going to cost you about that much.
Okay, let's move to the Republican side of this, Alan. We have Dr. George Flynn, and then we have Representative Larry Scroggs. Both are on the opposite ends of the spectrum regarding Republican politics.
I disagree with that. I think they're both conservative Republicans. I mean, I don't think ideologically there's a whole lot of difference between the two of them.
Okay, well, maybe I didn't state that right. They have a different constituency in the sense that Representative Scroggs has more of the leadership of the Republicans supporting him. Is that not accurate?
I'd say he probably has more of your traditional party activists and longtime Republican Party loyalists supporting him, yes.
Well, how is that going to work out?
Well, I mean, I think right now that's a pretty close race. Going into it, everyone assumed that Dr. Flynn was going to spend a whole lot of his personal wealth to get himself elected. I haven't really seen much of evidence of that, although I understand that he has bought some television time. It hadn't started to run yet, as far as I know, and I haven't seen it. And Larry Scroggs has got, I think, enough money to do the job. And I think even going back to what you're talking about with Carolyn Gates, the turnout in this election is likely to be very, very small on both sides because it's a May primary, and I don't think people in this community are still real aware that we have these county primaries in May. And I think any candidate, if they're properly organized and have motivated volunteers, I think they can use that to their advantage. And so if you can get your people to the polls in large numbers, or really in modest numbers, that may be enough to sway everything. So, I'll disagree a little bit. I think Carol Chumney could pull this out if she's got a good grassroots organization, because I really haven't seen A.C. Wharton spending a whole lot of money on this primary. And I think the same thing is true in the Republican side. It looks to me like both sides are kind of gearing up for a grassroots effort on Election Day and during early voting.
Susan, what do you think about the George Flynn, Larry Scroggs scenario?
Well, this is a primary. This isn't a general election. And people who vote in primaries, for the most part, are politically interested in their parties and they're activists, or they go to the polls because they know the candidate. And Larry Scroggs has been in the state legislature for 6 years, I believe, and he's one of the most respected legislators we've got in Nashville, certainly one of the most respected in the Shelby delegation. And I think that just by the fact that he has a strong constituency out in the Germantown, Far East, Shelby County area will help him immensely. If George Flynn pulls out a lot of his personal wealth and spends a lot of money advertising and trying to get whatever his message is, try to get it out, then he'll give Scroggs some trouble. But, there's the heat of the campaign hasn't really even begun yet. We're still a month away, and as of this taping, and people won't even engage for another couple of weeks until early voting. And you're going to have a lot of charges and countercharges coming back and forth. But just remember, it's a primary. George Flynn has really never participated actively in Republican politics before. Larry Scroggs has. He's been a longtime Republican. I think that will come down to play.
Strickland?
I think Susan and Alan are both right. Dr. Flynn has a real hard race to run, and he can only win it if he spends a tremendous amount of money. And apparently he'd have to spend of his own money, because I don't know how much he's raised from the community. But if he spent $400,000 on TV, which was what some people were saying 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago that he was going to do, then he might have a chance. But like Alan, I've not seen any evidence of that yet. And I think we would see it right now if he was really going to spend $400,000 of his own money. So I think Larry Scroggs is the favorite.
Okay, let's move into just whomever comes out the Democratic primary and whomever comes out the Republican primary. How much money will they need for the August 1 general election?
Oh, gee, maybe $300,000, $400,000.
I agree.
Because now we're talking about a real countywide election, not just a primary. And although the primary certainly is countywide, but we're talking about an election where people will really take an interest because the partisan candidates will have been determined, and now the people will get to choose between the candidates that the party followers have picked. Plus, don't forget that on the August 1st general election, which is the county general election, we'll also have on the ballot the statewide primaries for statewide offices. So that will turn out a lot of people, but the amount of money they need to get out that vote will be easily $350,000.
Will the candidates be able to raise from May 7th to August 1 the money they need to wage a very competitive race that they will need? Will
I
they be
think
able to
they will.
raise that kind of? I mean, so many people are saying that the money's drying up because of Lamar and Ed Bryant, and because, well, not so much on the Democratic side, but on the Republican side. And then you got the congressional races coming up for the 7th congressional district. I mean, will people be able to raise the money?
People who are giving money to the Senate races are people in a position who will be giving money to the top race in the county they live in. So they'll probably be able to raise close to it.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the sheriff's race, because that's, I think, probably for many people, the county mayor's race and the sheriff's race are the top two races that are probably the most important for people in this community. Right now, we have, on the Democratic side, we have Randy Wade and we have Henry Hooper. And then on the Republican side, we have Mark Luttrell, Don Wright, and
Bobby Simmons.
How are we going to fare on each side of those?
I think the Republican race is much tighter than the Democratic race. On the Democratic side, Randy Wade has been campaigning for this for almost a year, I think. He's built an organization. He's raised the money. As far as I can tell, I don't think Henry Hooper has done either one of those. So I think Randy Wade is way out front on that one. On the Republican side, and maybe I ought to defer to Alan here, but I see it as a three-way horse race that it's hard to predict who's going to win. I think the person who's going to win, we can't predict it now because we don't know how they're going to spend the money that they're going to spend. I want to say the person who has the best TV ad or ads is the one who's going to win, who can run it the most and it's the best quality. Obviously, I don't know who that person is because they really haven't started that. But I think it's that close that whoever spends their money the
So you really
wisest will
think
win.
that media campaigning is really the best way for a candidate to win these elections?
Well, not just television, but I think direct mail is extremely important. And I think a couple of pieces have gone out by the different campaigns, but not everything that's going to be coming. So I think in a primary, direct mail is highly effective. I don't know if Alan would agree with me and Jim would agree with me or not, but and it's a little bit more cost effective.
What about, you see signs everywhere now. You see yard signs, and now you're seeing a lot of people going to these 4x6 signs everywhere.
Well, yard signs are nice, and they sort of litter the landscape a little bit, but they're nice to get your name out there. But I don't believe they're nearly as effective as direct mail and television advertising. I think there are a lot of races in the past that prove that you can put out thousands of yard signs and you still can't win. And the one that always comes to mind is Joe Cooper, who is kind of a perennial candidate. He's running again for something, but he runs so often and puts out more signs than anybody and has yet to win a race.
It's one of those things too when you talk about yard signs. Just about everybody we've talked to in both the mayor's race and in the sheriff's race, and a lot of the races we're going to be talking about, countywide are not very well known. In fact, I don't think any of them have run countywide before. And so really everything that you do to get your name out there is going to help you, because if you don't have any name recognition and somebody drives by your sign and sees your name on a sign, you've increased your name recognition somewhat. I think Susan is right in terms of convincing someone then to actually vote for you it takes more than just having them know your name. And I think a lot of candidates sometimes fail to realize that. Well, if they just know my name, they'll vote for me. Well, people have got to have a reason for that. And so the direct mail, I think, in a primary, you can target. If you put an ad on television, you're not only reaching, if you're in the Republican primary, you're not only reaching Democrats in Memphis who aren't going to vote in your primary, you're reaching Republicans and Democrats in Mississippi and Arkansas. I mean, it really is a lot of money you're paying for to reach a lot of people that you don't need to reach, and so mail becomes that. But I still come back to it and say, if you're looking at the Republican primary for sheriff, it's going to come down to who gets their media message out, but also who can organize their voters and get them to the polls. Because again, you're going to have a low turnout, and if you're spending that money wisely, and part of your plan is to organize and target your voters, identify who they are, and then make sure they go to the polls on election day, you just increase your vote total by 2,000 or 3,000 votes countywide. That could be not only a margin of victory, but a landslide victory in that particular race.
Okay, on the Republican side, we have, like I mentioned earlier, Mark Luttrell, Bobby Simmons, Don Wright. Who's the favorite?
Well, I think I agree with Jim. I really think it's neck and neck. I mean, Don Wright is the chief deputy and has almost the weight of incumbency going for him. He's been running for this for a long time. Mark Luttrell has picked up a lot of support within the party. He's the director of the County Corrections Center and has a lot of experience running jails and so forth, and has really capitalized on that to become a player. And then Bobby Simmons, I told somebody the other day that if I were a betting man, I'd put some money on Bobby because he's worked very, very hard. He's got a lot of support, and he's raised a significant amount of money that if he spent it wisely, he could end up winning that race. I think it's so tight. It becomes a cliche, but it's almost too close to call.
Susan, one of the things, you mentioned Don Wright and him sort of being the incumbent, but doesn't that lend to him being a part of the Good Old Boy Network? And then some publicity just came out recently where he went into a business that was basically supporting a Democratic candidate, Randy Wade, and it was kind of negative publicity. How will that impact the negative publicity plus the Old Boy Network?
I'm not sure how that Good Old Boy Network is going to negatively affect Don Wright, and really, in fairness, Bobby Simmons, who's also been in that department for over a quarter of a century, and Randy Wade, who has also been, I believe he's been there for 29 years. So that you've got three candidates in the overall sheriff's race who have been part of the system. And people who don't like the system and who are upset with the way the jail has been run, that may affect those candidates and benefit Henry Hooper or benefit Mark Luttrell. I think that the way that'll work is, how does Mark Luttrell capitalize on being the outsider who's skilled in running prisons, use that kind of information as part of the Good Old Boy Network negatively against Wright, Simmons, and Wade.
Well, if I can add something to that.
Okay.
And vice versa, it's going to be interesting to see how Don Wright and Bobby Simmons use Mark Luttrell's lack of any experience in crime prevention. He's got no experience in crime prevention. Now, we all know that the jail is an important issue in the sheriff's race, but I don't think people out in the public really care about how the jail's running, other than it costs them some money.
I disagree with
What I think they care about is crime prevention. They care about safe streets and keeping criminals out of their neighborhoods. And I've seen poll results even as of 6 weeks ago on this very issue. And I think with Luttrell's lack of experience in that area, how are Bobby Simmons and Don Wright going to use that against him as opposite of what Susan said?
You've got a jail that has been run now, for how many years? 11, 12 years under a court order. And its budget and the Sheriff's Department's budget in the last couple of years has skyrocketed about $50 million. And you're saying people don't care about how the jail is run? Their property taxes are going up because they're directly linked to the increased cost in the jail. And crime prevention, we've got a crime commission here, we've got a police department here, and certainly the sheriff's department has a big hand in crime prevention, but I think that the jail is going to be the overwhelming factor in the sheriff's race this time.
Well, Luttrell wants it to be, but I don't think the public cares that much.
Let's move on. There was one thing I missed on the county mayor's race. Isaac Ford, the son of former Congressman Harold Ford Sr. and the brother of Harold Ford Jr., is an independent candidate for county mayor. How would that impact the Democratic candidate in the August 1 general mayor's race?
Well, let's make it clear, though, that he's not in the primary. He's not in the May 7th primary.
Well, he's not in the May, but he's the August 1 primary. General is what he is.
He will be very, very insignificant.
I think you're right, unless he was able to raise some money or somehow gets enough money or a following to be an impact. But just having his name on the ballot, I don't think is in and of itself is going to be all that significant.
Okay, one other race that I definitely wanted to touch on is the juvenile court clerk's race. Right now, Shep Wilburn is the Democratic nominee. He is the current office holder. And his opposition, well, it's going to be Steve Sampson on the Republican side. And there is one independent candidate, Samuel Watkins. How is this race going to turn out?
Well, again, there's no opposition in the primary for either one.
For August 1.
So we're talking about August. That's going to be a dogfight. I think it all ties in to the overall turnout effect that Susan was kind of hinting at earlier about the federal races in
And the
the
state
7th Congressional District and the Senate race, all on the Republican side. Is that going to turn out the Republican vote in East Shelby County so much that it tips the balance? Right now, Democrats and Republicans are almost 50-50 in this county. So any little sway one way or the other can help. And that race is going to be fit right in there.
I think it's going to be a harder race for Sampson than Wilburn, although it will be a tight race. And I think Wilburn will get a bounce from 2 years ago when he ran for city mayor, and he impressed a lot of people across the community, and I think that'll help him. But it all, again, depends on turnout, and Alan talked about that a little earlier. If the Republicans can turn out their vote and remind their voters to go down the ballot and look for the juvenile court clerk's race, then Sampson has a shot, especially if there's a large Republican turnout.
I'll tell you that particular race is going to be a big priority for the Republican Party. And if Steve can get out the message of what has transpired in that office since Shep took over, I always kid Steve and tell him, when he was there at the clerk as the chief deputy, he did the work of 5 people, because the first thing Shep did was come in and take that position and divide it into 5 and hire 5 new people to do essentially what Steve was doing. There's been just an incredible inflation of positions that have occurred in that office since he got there, and it's a waste of money. And if Steve can get that out, I think he'll win handily. The question is, will people take the time to really listen to the issues in that particular race? And it's a very, very important position.
Okay, let's move to the county commission seats. 2 races that are of quite a bit of interest. Commission 3, position 3, Joe Ford is currently holding that seat. His sister Ophelia Ford is running against him. Those are the only 2 people in this race, and they will be on the ballot May 7th. How is this race going to turn out?
I think Joe Ford wins. He's run for city council a couple times and won. He ran a spirited campaign for city mayor and got a significant amount of vote. Ophelia Ford's never run before. I think all the money people are behind Joe Ford. He's going to have the finances. I don't know if she is going to. So you combine the prior experience with the financial resources, and I think he's going to win.
So Joe Ford wins.
I'll defer to Jim on that. I really don't know.
Oh, okay. Let's fight this Democratic seat.
But it might be a fun race for people who are politically interested to watch a brother and a sister running against each other.
Yeah. Another hotly contested county commission race is going to be District 5, which at some point the conversation or the goal was to try to make that district 50-50 so a Democrat or Republican could win. However, it didn't work out that way. But we have on the Democratic side Joe Cooper and Guthrie Castle. How's that going to?
I think Guthrie's going to win. I think Joe works harder than just about any candidate I know and gets his name out and puts his signs all over the place. But Guthrie has got a very well-organized campaign, phone banks, and he's got the financial resources. He's already started direct mail. In a district race like this, direct mail is even more important. And Joe traditionally has not done that. He's just relied on yard signs. And I think people who are really watching will end up voting for Guthrie.
Susie?
I defer to the Democratic expert over here.
But you're the unbalanced
Unbalanced?
I'm sorry, this is unbiased journalist who
First
can
it's like Crone, then you insult me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
What are we doing here?
The weather was bad, the traffic was bad. Okay, let's move on to county clerk. That position currently is held by Jane Creason. This time she has opposition, Jane Creasy. How's she going to do?
Well, whoever this is running against Jane Creason with a similar name, I think is it a he or a she, is making a big mistake, and that is thinking that the voters are dumb. They're not. And I think Jane Creason has as much name recognition in this community as anybody. Everybody writes her a check once a year for their car, tags that we have to get, and we make out a personal check to her. So I think, and she's done a good job. There's no controversy coming out of her office. It seems to be a well-run office, so she has a good shot.
Okay, on the Democratic side, we have Jennings Bernard, Janice Fully Love from WDIA, and Michael Williamson.
I think James full of only because of name recognition. I mean, she's been on the radio for a lot of years, and she has built up a lot of name recognition, and in a race with little money, people are going to go in and vote for the person they've heard of.
Agree with Jim.
Alan, I'm so sorry. In District 5, you have John Ryder, Bruce Thompson, and Jerry Cobb.
Sure do.
Come on, Alan, give us some feedback. Give us some feedback.
Well,
who are the Democrats going to have to whoop up on?
Well, I think that's, you talk about a real interesting race is that one. You could look at each one of them. They've all got something going for them. Jerry Cobb, well known within the party. Party activists know who he is. There's a group of party activists that are very loyal to him. Bruce Thompson has come on with, I think, a very aggressive campaign, raised a lot of money. And he really hadn't been involved in politics, but he's been involved in community activities. A lot of people know who he is. It's first time out. John Ryder is about as well known within Republican circles as you can get. I think most people say because of that, you got to give John a certain amount of an edge there. He's raised enough money to get the job done, and nobody knows better than John Ryder how to put together a campaign. It's going to be interesting to see. I think that's another one, depending upon how well people get their vote out. I think any one of the three could win. Okay,
I've got to wrap up now. I do want to thank my guest, Alan Crone, Chairman of the Republican Party, Susan Thorp, political analyst for the Commercial Appeal, and James Strickland, who's the former chair of the Shelby County Democratic Party. And I want to encourage every voter to get out and vote during early voting, which is April 17th through May 7th, election May 2nd, and the election is actually May 7th. Please vote, and thank you very much for watching Memphis Style Politics. I'm Gale Jones-Carson.
To some degree. I just don't
Brought together families for a day of fun, food.
Salute Fatherhood sponsored its 5th annual Father's Day Out picnic Saturday at Overton Park. This is video of the 1999 picnic. 4 softball teams competed for a grand trophy. Memphis City Councilman Myra Lowry and Democratic Party Chairperson Gale Jones-Carson founded this annual event, which seems to get bigger every year. Nice to see.
Nice to honor Dad.
That's for sure.
Happy Father's Day to you.
Of the 1999 picnic, 4 softball teams competed for a grand trophy. Memphis City Councilman Myra Lowry and Democratic Party Chairperson Gale Jones-Carson founded this annual event, which seems to get bigger every year. Nice to see.
Nice to honor Dad.
That's for sure.
Happy Father's Day.
Out picnic Saturday at Overton Park. This is video of the 1999 picnic. 4 softball teams competed for a grand trophy. Memphis City Councilman Myra Lowry and Democratic Party Chairperson Gale Jones-Carson founded this annual event, which seems to get bigger every year. Nice to see.
Nice to honor Dad.
That's for sure.
Happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, these days it's more important. The Salute and Fatherhood sponsored the 5th annual Father's Day Out picnic Saturday at Overton Park. This is video of the 1999 picnic. 4 softball teams competed for a grand trophy. Memphis City Councilman Myra Lowry and Democratic Party Chairperson Gale Jones-Carson founded this annual event, which seems to get bigger every year. Nice to see.
Nice to honor Dad.
That's for sure.
Happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, these days it's more important. Coming up, some of these movie fans thought they were in line for a presidential run. His daughter, Corinna Gore-Schiff, says that she hopes her father runs because he's the best man for the job. Mrs. Schiff is in Memphis with her parents for a weekend retreat the Gores are hosting for Democratic donors. News Channel 3's Christine Conley was there.
Close to 400 Democrats crammed the Hilton sitting on pins and needles, hoping maybe this would be the moment former Vice President Al Gore announces a run for the presidency in 2004.
Hopefully he will give us some strong indication as to whether or not he will be running in 2004. As you know, Shelby County turned out the vote for him in 2000 by 48,000 votes. This county really supports the former vice president. He'll run again?
He may give some indications, but I don't think it's going to be a flat out, guess what, I'm running, kids. You know, I don't think that's going to happen, but it'd be cool if it did.
And tonight will be one of the beginning, or one of the early tests of whether or not Al Gore is serious about 2004 and the kind of effort he would put forward if he were to run. If I was a betting man, and I'm not, I'd bet he's going to be good tonight.
Gore tells us he came here tonight to drum up support for local candidates and not focus on himself. This fundraiser alone will pull in $60,000 for the Shelby County Democratic Party, and the candidates couldn't be happier.
Well, anytime that we get someone who served as vice president to come to your county, your city, it's indeed an honor. We do respect our leaders, so it is an honor.
News Channel 3's Christine Conley reporting. Other news now. Olive Branch police are investigating a kidnapping of a woman at a car wash. Officers say the woman was attacked by a man.
Welcome to Memphis Style Politics. I'm Gale Jones-Carson. My guests today are Jackson Baker, who's the senior editor with the Memphis Flyer, and O.C. Pleasant, who is the chairman of the Shelby County Election Commission. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Okay, we're going to discuss the upcoming election, which will be August 1, and early voting will be July 12th through July 27th. And O.C., I really would like to start with you because from my understanding, some things have changed with how we're going to be doing early voting.
Well, basically, early voting will begin on the 12th of July, as you indicated, and that will be at the Election Commission office from 8 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. That's on a Friday. On Saturday, the 13th of July, we will open the remaining 18 sites, and they will be open, including the Election Commission office, on weekdays, beginning at 10 a.m. and ending at 7 p.m. each day. On Saturdays, the hours will be from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. We would hope that this would provide ample opportunity to any voter who would like to vote in the upcoming August 1 election with that opportunity to vote. We would strongly encourage them to do so, and the reason being is that, one, you avoid a lot of the hassle that goes along with Election Day. Secondly, for persons who need to change their addresses, and there are a lot of voters out there who need to change their addresses, it's quite easy and simple to do. And thirdly, for persons who need to change their name, they can do it and vote in their precinct that they are respectively assigned to based on their address. So we think that early voting affords a great deal of benefits, the convenience of it, and as an example, and the length of time in which you have to cast your ballot.
Well, let me ask you, who do you think benefits most in early voting, and particularly in expanding the time frame for the 18 locations, Democrats or Republicans?
Well, I can go back and reflect on the fact that we as Democrats, we encourage that and push for that initiative in the General Assembly. And by and large, the persons who voted for and passed the bill to permit early voting were Democrats. On the other hand, Republicans tend to take a greater advantage of it than we do. We were hoping that when we had the bill passed and those legislators who supported the bill and voted for it, that it would provide another opportunity for increased voter turnout with regards to our constituencies. So, but that hasn't turned out to be the case.
So basically you've just shifted from election day to early voting, so the numbers haven't increased.
Right. I think that voters, as they become, Democratic voters, as they become aware of it, are tending to take advantage of the opportunity that is afforded by early voting. And I think that in due time we'll see a goodly number of Democrat voters participate in that process.
Jackson, got any comments on this?
I think that's exactly right. I think it may have been a Democratic invention, so to speak, but the Republicans have learned how to use it. And I think that they've pretty much caught up. I don't think there's a party gap with early voting. What I did find interesting in the last election, the primary elections that we had last month, was that some of the candidates did very well in early voting and didn't do as well on election day. One candidate saved her seat because she'd done early voting. That was Linda Rentorf. On election day, she got beat.
But in another race, I think when A.C. Gillis and Melvin Burgess ran against one another in '98, I think A.C. Gillis won with the votes that he acquired in early voting by some 10,000 votes.
Well, as a general rule, the candidates who have that astuteness about political campaigns will find that doing the early voting and what we call banking the early vote will tend to be successful in the outcome and the result of the election. They will end up being the winners generally, because that gets to be a real crucial and important vote. If you can bank it through early voting, I think the greater the chance of being successful on election day.
And I think that what unites the case I was talking about, Gale, and the one you mentioned, was those were incumbents. Those were people who had the advantage of an organization that was established. Challengers, insurgents have a harder time with early voting than established people or incumbents.
Well, do you think they have more difficulty because it is more costly to run an early voting campaign, because you have to try to get people to the polls maybe, I guess, like now 14 days as opposed to one-day election day?
I think it's more direct to the voter. If you're going to rely on election day where you wait for the voters en masse to show up, then that presents somewhat of a problem. But if the astute campaigners and office seekers will take the time to prepare a ballot, mail it to each of the individual voters, well, really not necessarily to each of the individual voters, but to household, and do some targeting, I think that they find that that strategy is more effective and gets the job done.
And I really think it's a matter of who has a better network. And again, in the primary, it's usually the incumbents who have a better network than their challengers. What's going to be interesting about the election coming up on August 1st is that the countywide part of it is really going to be fairly evenly matched, because you've got your resourceful network involved. The Republicans have theirs, and it's going to be network versus network. They have more incumbents, however, in the county positions, so they have that edge.
Well, that's something else I wanted to touch on. Republicans have held these countywide offices basically since '94, because the primary started, I guess, in '92. And most of the people who are in office now are incumbents. You have a few seats where, there are no incumbents. And I tell many candidates that it is difficult to beat an incumbent, but it's not impossible. So how do you see Democrats faring, I guess, overall in an election that's most of the offices are held by incumbent Republicans?
Add to that the fact that the Republicans have really heavy-duty races going on at the statewide primary level. They've got the Senate race, which is very hotly contested between Lamar Alexander and Ed Bryant. They've got the six-man and woman race for 7th District congressional seat, and 3 of those people are from here, and they're going to try to every cadre, they're going to lift every stone and get every person they ever knew out. That's going to give the Republicans, I think, a real boost in countywide running.
Well, I continue to hear people talk about the boost in the 7th District because of the 3 Shelby Countyans who are running.
Actually, they're 4 counting Sonny Carlota. They're 4.
Yeah, okay, but that is sort of on the edge of Shelby County. The 7th District goes basically almost up to Nashville. So what percentage or how many votes in the 7th District actually comes out of Shelby County, which are Republican?
I don't know, but there's one interesting scenario, and I'll be specific. But Senator Marsha Blackburn, who is a state senator from up around Middle Tennessee, I've heard some of the, I guess, professional soothsayers, if you want to call them that, predict that it's very likely that she may win that nomination.
Because of the split in Shelby County.
In Shelby County. I think that gets to be very interesting, but I would agree that when you look at the 7th Congressional District in relationship, Shelby County in relationship to the entire 7th Congressional District, most of it is other than Shelby County.
Yeah, from my understanding, Jackson's only like less than 40%, 30-some percent, which are in Shelby County, and of that 30-some percent, what percentage are Republican? But what percentage of that are Republican?
Well, 40% of the total vote in that district is going to come from Shelby County, according to previous elections. And I'll tell you, Gale, every one of those 3 major candidates, the Republicans running for that seat, can take pencil and paper and show you mathematically how if they split the vote evenly 3 different ways, then Marsha Blackburn will not win. I think they've got their heads in the clouds on that one. I think Marsha Blackburn is a real threat to win that race. But that's yet another reason why you're going to get a heavy vote here. She's going to get her adherents to the polls also. And the 7th District...
But her constituency is not in Shelby County.
Well, she'll get some votes in Shelby County, though. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
even she will turn... she's here twice a week, she tells me.
Oh,
now,
really?
I don't know if she really is that often or not, but I see her a lot. And so I think there aren't going to be any uncommitted Republican voters. I think every one of them is somehow going to get routed to the polls by somebody.
And so what percentage boost do you think the Lamar Alexander, Ed Bryant race will bring to Republicans in Shelby?
Well, that's huge, too.
Yeah, it's a tremendous influence. I call it the Thompson factor rather than, and the Thompson factor to the extent that when he decided that he would not seek re-election to the U.S. Senate, that kind of threw things up in the air with regards to politics in Shelby County, period. Whether it would be on the Democratic side or the Republican side. For Democrats, I think it really poses a challenge to the extent that Democrat success in large measure depends upon how successful the Democratic Party will be in getting its constituents out. It's going to be a situation that, and I would imagine in any election that's the case, but it's going to be a situation in which whoever gets their constituency out will be the successful candidate and will be the winner.
Just imagine the difference it would have made if Harold Ford Jr. had been the congressional choice, I mean the choice for the Senate by the Democratic establishment rather than Bob Clement, because not only would he bring out a lot of vote here in Shelby County, the race to succeed him would be just incredibly busy. That didn't happen. We've got a very peaceful situation there. The Republicans very organized. I just think that has to help them a lot.
Well, okay. On August 1, we will have the countywide election. We also will have the state and federal primaries. Some of the state legislators have opposition, some of the Democrats, including Senator John Ford. Will this increase the number of Democratic voters turning out to the polls because some of the legislators have opposition?
Marginally, I would say marginally. I think John Ford is very confident. He expresses a great deal of confidence about that race. I think Richard Fields is going to work very hard. But John's used to winning that race and used to winning it by huge majorities or not even being challenged. And I don't think that race by itself is going to turn out a large vote.
But, I mean, there's some others like State Representative Lois DeBerry, State Representative Catherine Bowers, State Representative Barbara Cooper. I know those three,
no Republican's going to beat them.
No, I'm talking about, but these are Democrats running against them in August. So that's what, but they have opposition. But what I'm saying is, since they have opposition, will this increase voter turnout among Democrats? Because they've got to turn their base out.
I think it will.
Because they have opposition. That's what I'm looking at. The more people who have opposition, hopefully the more people will turn out.
Yeah.
Even if it's token opposition.
And I would agree with you, because each candidate has his or her own constituency and base. Some of those that are in a given candidate's constituency or base will not turn out if it were not for their favorite lawmaker or representative being in the race. So that has the effect of bringing forth voters who would not otherwise come out to vote in the election.
And that's one of the things that I think people continue to talk about, the increased voter turnout among Republicans, but we're not taking into consideration that some of our legislators, even though theirs is a general, they do have Democratic opposition, which should increase the turnout among Democrats.
Yeah. I guess I'm just going to be the minority of one on this trio. Even though I've always greatly admired both of you and have always wished both of you well. In this case, I think you're being Pollyanna-like.
You don't think people are going to turn, their base will turn out?
I think none of the people you mentioned are going to be seriously challenged in their primaries. On the other hand,
they won't, but I
think there's a very stiff race in Mike Cornell's district among the Republicans to unseat him.
But that's November.
That's going to bring a lot of votes out on August 1, the race between those people. There's a stiff race between Joe Kent and his challenger, Chuck Bates. That's going to bring out a lot of votes in that district. So those are additional factors. The Democrats don't have any matching situations where they have an incumbent who's really under fire or an open seat where the Republicans are really shooting for it.
But I'm willing to bet you that none of the incumbent office holders going to take it for granted.
No, they're not going to. They're going to be out there campaigning, and they're going to turn their base out.
Yeah, and they've got to turn their base out.
The Democratic office holders, you're talking about.
The Democratic office holders.
Of course, because they're all good politicians, people. Absolutely.
And consequently, that will, like I say, turn out the vote. I mean, if they don't have opposition and there's no noise, then their base stays home.
Yeah.
But most incumbents don't take. Well, I only know one incumbent who didn't put out one sign when he had opposition, but most incumbents don't do that.
I'm curious. Our audience is curious. To who is that?
County Commissioner Walter Bailey had opposition, and he didn't have to put out one sign. He's been in office 30 years, and he was returned with over 70% of the vote. If not, 80%?
Well,
but most elected officials don't operate that way. Most of them, I don't care how token the opposition is, they will campaign, they will spend money, they will turn their base out.
Councilman Allison Dryllis did a similar thing years ago when he was on the city council, and he submitted his financial disclosure, and I think he had on there an expense of 32 cents. At that time, postage was 32
cents. One letter to one voter?
And that was to pay for the financial report.
Okay, let's kind of move on before we run out of time and cover some of the races. At the top of the countywide ticket is A.C. Wharton and George Flynn.
You would think that A.C. Wharton would be in very good shape there. In fact, to be perfectly honest, when I first heard that A.C. Wharton was thinking about running, I figured, well, that's it. He's the mayor. He'll sweep the primary. He'll sweep the general. That was before, however, the Senate race opened up and the congressional race, which is going to generate that huge Republican turnout. It's before a couple of those Republican races got started at the state rep level. And it's before Flynn showed what he could do with money and a good marketing campaign in the race against Larry Scruggs. I mean, in the Republican primary, Larry Scruggs had the entire support of the Republican regular army and still got beat. That's usually the only people who turn out for a primary like that.
Well, but one of the things I've noticed about the Republican Party is the grassroots Republicans don't necessarily do what their leadership says. They usually don't operate like that, not based on what I've seen over the years. I mean, a classic example is the leadership supported Calvin Williams years ago, an African-American Republican, but the grassroots Republicans said no. They voted for Jimmy Moore, who at that time was a Democrat, who became a Republican.
That has to be a racial factor, I believe, rather than a political factor, though. In this case, I don't think you're going to see that. I do think you still have some divisiveness in the Republican Party, though. I don't think Flynn has the absolute unity of support that A.C. Horton does, although A.C.'s is not wall-to-wall either. There are still people, as you know, who are nursing some wounds from the primary.
Yeah, but what percentage of the
Not to the same extent as you find in the Republican ranks, I don't think.
Well, I think A.C. is an exemplary candidate, a great candidate. He has the ability to do what I call walk on both sides of the street. His candidacy plays well in both communities based on what informal survey that I've done. I think he'll do extremely well, and I think that he'll be the next mayor of Shelby County.
Now, I do have to ask this question because this is something that is constantly coming up in the political community, and that's Sir Isaac Ford. What role is he going to play in the outcome of the winner of this race? During the primary, he had signs out that...
Some in Spanish.
Yeah, but the signs that he has out now, he has bumper stickers, everything's done extremely well now. And it's obvious that he's actually campaigning and putting money in his campaign. What kind of impact can he have on the Democratic candidate? Because I don't think he would take any Republican votes.
That really depends a lot on what some of the senior Fords do between now and Election Day. If Harold Ford Sr. Returns from Florida, makes a definitive statement in favor of AC and actually campaigns for him, that makes a huge difference. If Congressman Ford, his son, does the same, that makes a huge difference. If they remain on the sidelines and Sir Isaac is allowed to campaign on his own with, as you point out, some resources, then Sir Isaac is not making, I don't think, a very coherent exposition of his policy ideas, but he's still a Ford, and he's got some of that, not only does the name count for somebody, but he's got some of that Ford self-belief that he projects. He'll get some votes. He will affect the margin of this campaign. Whether it's enough to give AC serious problems, I don't know, but it's a possibility.
What kind of percentage do you think it would take for him to interfere with AC Warden becoming the next mayor?
Anything from 5% on could be very dangerous.
Yeah, I agree.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, moving on to sheriff.
That's going to be, I think, a sizable vote, 5%.
Because it's going to be a close race.
Yeah.
Well, George Flynn spent $400,000 or $500,000 in the primary. He may spend $1 million
or more.
Or more for the general. Will dollars make the difference?
Well, it's going to have a significant impact. I don't know that it will make the difference. I think, in my mind, one of the issues is whether or not an election can be bought. And
is that actually buying an election?
Well, I think so. I think that what one has to keep in mind is that the good book tells us where your treasure is where your heart lies. Now, that's why it's important for individual voters or whomever to make that investment in the race. And that's because you bring more to the table when you've got many people involved in your campaign. If it's only you, then the likelihood of it being successful as a candidate for mayor, I think, is not that.
There's one more factor too, OC. I think you touched upon a while ago on the plus side of it, which is AC's ability to see all sides of an issue and see the complexities on all sides of an issue. Now, he has frustrated some Democrats, including, as I understand, a couple of people in his campaign, by doing too much of that. And too much of that appears indecisive, or it certainly appears open to all parties, whereas Flynn has his message pretty well honed. It's a single message. Low taxes or no taxes. Accountability is his notch word. I think that for those people who are looking for simple answers, he could provide something that AC doesn't. I do think, however, that AC has enormous advantages, both personally and from the point of view of his past, that are hard for anyone to beat.
I would agree, and you can't put too much out there as a candidate in terms of issues. The professionals say you do, what about at most 3 issues, and you just deal with those 3 issues and those 3 issues only. And those 3 issues have to reflect what the concerns of the voters are.
Let's move on to the sheriff's race, Randy Wade and Mark Luttrell.
Luttrell looks like a movie sheriff, either the Western sheriff variety or the modern air-conditioned office variety. He has that look. Rugged, kind of nice-looking fellow, very sincere-looking guy. I think that by itself is part of his appeal. Plus, at this point, he will have the united party behind him. He handled his opponents in the Republican primary very easily. Randy Wade, on the other hand, is a very gifted guy who's well-connected. I think he's going to have a little trouble with the throw the rascals out syndrome, because that's what happened in the Republican primary. The people Luttrell beat were part of the regime. Randy will be perceived that way too, I think.
But those were Republicans who thought that way. Democrats don't necessarily think that way.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, but the other issue that I think we have to come to grips with in that race is that the sheriff's office is gradually becoming one of a jailer. Because as the annexation takes place, there is less and less more and more municipal support that's required in terms of law enforcement, and less county support in terms of the sheriff's office. About the only incorporated area at this point that requires law enforcement from the sheriff's office is Arlington, I think. And then you've got these small unincorporated areas. The point of it is that the sheriff becomes viewed more and more as a constitutional officer who has primary responsibility for the jail.
So it's not a person who gets in, rolls up his sleeves, and goes out in the community and try to solve all these crime problems we have.
Well, that can be
Jack Owen describing there.
Yeah.
But Jack, but I think that's also Randy Wade's reputation is getting in, getting out in the community, coming up with viable solutions for the problems that are in the community.
But I do think, too, that there must be some advocacy in law enforcement in terms of how to improve the quality of life. And that's all government is about anyway, is improving the quality of life for its citizens. So there has to be some advocacy as well as, being a good jailer. And I think that therein lies the difference between the two candidates.
That's well said. If Randy can get his message out, can advocate the right ideas, and our friend David Upton's always got this lucid talk about getting crime out of the community. If he can do enough of that, then I think that what is a virtue for Luttrell, the fact that he's identified with the jail issue, could be something of a handicap.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the county trustee. Bob Patterson now is the current office holder, and he's been challenged by E.C. Jones, who's the city council person with a base.
He has a base, and he benefits from the racial split a little bit, in the sense that it is presumed that a white Democrat will inherit the black vote, which generally votes Democratic, but also pick up some white votes as well, perhaps enough to make the difference. Bob Patterson, however, is a very established Republican who has friendships across the party line too. In fact, I've seen him at Democratic functions, and so have you.
You're right, he goes to Democratic functions, but how many Democrats actually cross over and vote Republican?
Oh, I think it happens for personal reasons.
Yeah, and I think that therein determines who becomes the office holder. I've said for a number of years now that when you look at the Republican Party and the primary election, they're becoming the party of the office holders, the current office holder, was not due to the fact that we have so many Republicans in Shelby County. As a matter of fact, the primary results will prove just the opposite. But when it comes to the general election, you get this crossover where Democrats tend to vote. Yeah. to vote Republican.
Okay, let's touch on the juvenile court clerk race in which Shel Wilburn was appointed to that position, and he's been challenged by Steve Stampson, who had worked in the office under Bob Martin. And
Gale, I'm a firm believer in the thesis that you don't become a huge success in life unless you pass through a near-death experience. and from that point of view, Chef Wilburn has a chance of becoming a huge success because he's having his near-death experience right now. A very unfortunate set of circumstances whereby an employee of his, who ironically enough, came to be his employee because of a deal made with Republicans to get the office, has come back to haunt him, causing a lot of grief. Unfortunately, it may be true, but I think it's unfortunate that his chief defense, aside from his not being involved in it personally, has been that he called for the investigation himself. In that case, he just looks like somebody who brought it upon himself. In the meantime, Steve Stampson was identified with a previous regime, and against Stampson himself, there seems to be no particular charges. I think you have to give the Republicans advantage there. I think unless Shep pulls a rabbit out of a hat.
O.C., what do you think?
Well, I thought that prior to the incident of the FBI investigating the office and the mismanagement of funds and so on, I thought that Shep had the edge. To me, that's somewhat in doubt at the moment. I do feel like, however, that Democrats will continue to stay with Shep, and that he'll have that solid base of support with him. The issue becomes one of whether or not those persons who were Republicans or independents who had given strong consideration to supporting him and voting for him will continue to do so.
Okay, County Register currently being held by Leatherwood. And his opposition is Otis Jackson, who has run for the office before. How's that race going?
Quite frankly, some of my Democratic friends tell me they still resent Otis Jackson's running as an independent 2 years ago, and causing, in their estimation, the defeat of the Democratic candidate, who was John Freeman. Now, we know there are other factors involved there, but that is a fact, and it's very hard for someone to overcome that disadvantage when you've alienated on the front end members of your party.
We got to touch on one more race before we close out, and that's Janice Fully Love for County Court Clerk and Jane Creason.
Jane's very popular, as we pointed out in the conversation beforehand. So is Janice Full of Love. It'd be very interesting to see how that comes out. Two very popular people.
Two very popular women.
Okay, all right. I'd like to thank my guests for being on my show, Jackson Baker, O.C. Pleasant. I'd like to thank my viewers, and I'm asking each person to vote during early voting, which begins July 12th and ends July 27th. We must bank our votes during early voting. Thank you. I'm Gale Jones Carson.